Hi everyone, this is Macy. Welcome back to Code to Create. In this video, I will interview one of my best friend, Michael Lyashenko from Tasharen. He originally created the NGUI, which was the top seller and top growth on the Unity asset store for several years, and this system is still being used by various products. After the success of NGUI, Michael created Windward, which is available on Steam. It's being played by thousands more players. And let's jump to the interview. Welcome, Michael. How are you? Thank you for coming here. So this is my first episode, and I decided to interview game developers that I really admire, and I think they have very great stories, and I would love to hear from the people like you. When did you decide to start your career as a game developer?
When I got fed up with the overtime working as an employee of a game development company, it seems like it's a normal thing for game development companies to ask their employees to work overtime, no extra pay, no reason at all, no incentives other than just keeping their job. And I mean, some people think it's okay. I thought it was a little bit much. I just decided to try something myself just to see what would happen. I just wanted to risk it, basically.
So you were willing to take risk, but how did that really happen? Like, did you just decide, okay, I'm gonna quit my job this day, or say you had your strategy, you had your exit strategy, or like a transition?
I didn't really have much of a transition or an exit strategy. I just wanted to give it a try. I knew that if anything went bad in the end, in the long run, I could just return to another position somewhere,
Right.
Pick up where I left off, just keep going. But I just wanted to try, I wanted to risk it. I wanted to try, see what would happen if I was there on my own.
Right. So was there any particular event that really pushed you to move forward, or is just slowly progression of the change?
I would say it's more of a slow progression, because even when I was working in other companies, I would go home and I would continue working just for myself, coding my own games, working on tools that I wanted to work on for my own future projects. So I was always doing something, and just leaving my job and giving this independent thing a try, it's just a normal evolution of what I was doing.
What kind of advice you could give to other people if they want to do the same?
Don't wait too long. The longer you wait, the more difficult it's going to be.
Yes.
Especially when they get in a position where they have kids, they have somebody depending on them. It's going to be a lot more risky to just up and leave their secure job to try something that as risky as just going independent.
Right. So, I mean, everyone would say just try it, but I think from your story is you actually did it after work every day.
Yes.
You're working on your own thing every day. So people actually need to start now, act now, and also start with small hours every day instead of just try to quit a job right away, like say I'm like rage quit. Right?
Yeah, well, rage quitting is obviously not a good choice, because it's not just risky, it's just silly, it's burning bridges. But if they have the motivation for it, doing
Yes.
something after school, or after work, after whatever they're doing, is a good way to get started. It's a good way to have something there when they actually finally decide to go independent, something to fall back on.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And let's talk about a bit about money. And a lot of people, before they start a business, they always say, I need investment, I need the venture capitals, I need angel investment, or I need to join certain accelerator programs. So how did you fund your gain?
I funded it myself. I had some savings that I knew I could rely on. I had about 2 years worth just to fall back on. And
So how much that would be, like, you recommending for anyone who in North America, like?
there's no specific number I would recommend. It's more of whatever you feel comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And if, say, for example, you have 2 years savings and you have a plan to become profitable within a year, you know that if something goes wrong, you still have a year worth of savings to fall back on.
Right.
And that gives you plenty of time to find a new job if something doesn't work out.
Right.
Investments, they're good, but they usually come with strings attached. And I mean, it's really up to you whether you feel comfortable with something like that. In my case, I had the savings, like I said, to fall back on, and I just went for it. And ended up being a lot more profitable a lot sooner than I expected.
That's awesome. Good to hear. So you mentioned at first you were working a couple hours after very high intense jobs. As we all know, working at traditional game companies can be very intense. So since you don't have that kind of job anymore, you're working for yourself. What's your day is like? What's your working schedule? It's like, how do you manage your hours?
My day? That's an odd one. I actually have 6 days a week instead of 7.
Okay.
My days are usually 28 hours long, and I basically go to sleep when I'm actually tired rather than when I'm supposed to go to sleep.
Okay.
So my sleeping schedule is highly unusual by regular standards, but it works for me. It gives me more time during the day to actually be productive. Because let's face it, in a normal weekday, which is 8 hours long on a typical job, you show up for work, you're tired from the night before, it takes a couple of hours to get going, let's say 3 hours. By the time 3 hours pass, it's lunchtime. You go for lunch, you come back full, you're not feeling overly productive either at this point. So again, you're digesting, you're doing some little things here and there. By the time you actually get back on track and become productive, it's already like 4 o'clock and it's getting close to going back home. So a typical day is actually not very productive.
Right. So find whatever works for you.
Exactly.
Don't follow. I do agree. I think the 9 to 5 thing is more like a society like structure to make sure people feel like they belong something.
The 9 to 5 is actually, it's good for menial tasks. Something like you're working on a factory, you know, you're putting pieces here and there. But for creative work and for something that involves the mind, it's much more efficient to focus on what you're doing and keep going as long as I can. Like, for example, I don't even have lunch because I think lunch interrupts the workday. Instead, I eat twice a day. Large meals, but still twice a day.
That's a really good advice, I think. Especially when I first started, I was really trying to follow what other people were saying, like you need to go to sleep early, wake up early kind of thing, and it did not work for me and had a very big struggle with it because I was just like, I'm not usual. So it's good to hear other people saying that they find their own schedule, whatever that works for them. Let's talk a bit more about the game industries and what do you feel about free-to-play games? I mean,
if I could strangle them all, I would.
Yes, actually, I think free-to-play game really damaging the industry and make people believe.
To say the least.
Yeah, and actually sabotage a lot of great ideas and a lot of great games. So. I know you made your first game free to play, right? The Starlink was free to play.
Yes.
And how did that go?
To be honest with you, the income from that particular game didn't change from when it was premium to free to play.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't take advantage of all the things that typical free to play games take advantage of, like for example, built-in ads. I hate ads personally, so I didn't want to have any in my game. So the only thing I had in my game is basically $5 worth of in-app purchases, which is the maximum you can get in the game. You cannot go any higher. A lot of the games, the free-to-play games, they get their revenue from so-called whales, which is basically people who get addicted to the game so much they end up spending like hundreds of dollars on the game just in in-app purchases. I specifically did not want to have that in my game. I didn't do it for profit. I actually did it as a test for my networking library at the time. So I didn't particularly care much whether it's highly successful or not. So
it was a really fun game. I really enjoyed it, and I actually did see other companies was trying to steal your game. It means popularity. It's a good game. That's why people try to steal your idea, I would say, and then try to make similar games.
It's worse than that.
Yeah.
People not only steal ideas, which is fine, by the way.
Right.
They tend to take the entire game and just repackage it and put it up somewhere else. Like, for example, I had my games appear on the Amazon App Store, which I didn't put up there.
Wow.
I had Starlink there, but I didn't put Windward there. And yet some guy basically took my Android APK and put it up on the Android store as his own. Yeah.
That's crazy. So how did you take any action, or just?
Of course, I just contacted Amazon and saying like, this is BS. The game is not meant for Amazon devices at all. It's optimized for highly powerful NVIDIA devices, and basically had them remove it. But I mean, it's definitely not the only time of something like this happening. Right. And this is for a fairly obscure game as well. Like Windward is a decent game on Steam, but on mobile devices it's fairly unknown.
Yeah, that's. I mean, piracy is another thing we always concerned about. I think as a game developer, as any creative person. So how do you look at piracy when you first see people?
So my piracy is basically free advertising. Piracy in a sense where the pirate does not get money is totally fine with me. Right. Piracy in a sense where the pirate takes my stuff and put it up for sale himself, yeah, that I have a problem with.
Right.
But if a pirate just takes the game and like shares it with friends, or just like even put it up online just as a free thing for other people to try and other people to play, I'm totally cool with that.
Right.
People that like the game enough, they will just go ahead and buy it, or at the very least they'll just go ahead and recommend it to their friends, which means more sales for the developer.
So you don't mind if they're just your fans, but if they're trying to make a buck for it, that's not right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's not their work, right?
Right. I totally agree. That's a different approach to it. Towards like when you're a fan, just take your game to share. I mean, I'm fine with that too. I think if they just really enjoy the game and want, share it, I believe they're eventually gonna buy. It's just a matter of time.
They might buy or they might not. It's their choice.
Right.
If they like it enough, they'll either buy it or they'll recommend it to friends. It's like more exposure for independent developers such as myself.
So where do you get your ideas from?
I just play games. I play games, I see what works, what doesn't, what I would want to improve, and that's basically it.
Yeah, so improve, and how do you improve your game? Like, where do you get the idea for improvements?
Most of the time I just listen to players. When they play the game and they start complaining about something, I know that something needs to change. I'll give you an example. Most recent thing I added to Windward were dragon fights. So ships actually get to fight dragons. And at the first, when I implemented the fight, it was just a very difficult boss fight. It was also very tedious. There was nothing special, nothing interesting about it. It was just players attacking a very powerful dragon and just dying to him over and over and over until eventually they defeated it after basically graveyard rushing them off for a couple of hours. I mean, some enjoyed it, but the most people did not find it fun, and I agreed with them. So I changed the fight completely. I made it so that dragons, first of all, had way less hit points and they didn't do as much damage, but they also were highly affected by players' resistances. So players were able to acquire gear that would essentially prevent them from dragon's special attacks, like their breath, for example. So the dragon would not be able to kill them nearly as quickly, if at all. I also changed it so that dragon had special abilities. Like, for example, he places a curse on a random nearby player, and that player gets increased damage, increased regeneration, and all that. So it becomes more powerful, but at the same time, every second he ends up harming everyone around them, like every player around them. And that damage keeps increasing the longer the player stays in the vicinity. So that player has a choice, whether they can stay there and keep attacking the dragon, doing more damage to the dragon, or they need to leave the area. If the player stays, eventually after 12 seconds, everybody around the player dies. So he essentially kills everyone around, like all his friends, just to deal a little bit of extra damage to the dragon. Of course, if the player chooses to leave and not damage anyone when the curse ends, that player now gets a buff, so they become more powerful for 30 seconds. and they also cannot be affected by the Dragon's Curse a second time.
So that's a lot of variables and a lot of little trick and logics in a single fight.
That's only like one of the dragon's abilities. It does a couple of things, like summoning different ads, changing the region to his faction. So basically, he keeps the players on his toes. Players have to not only focus on the dragon, but on the random events that happen around him as well. So they have to keep their eyes open and have to pay attention.
That's a lot of work from what it sounds like. So how many hours?
Just a couple of hours.
Just a couple hours. So it's still a lot of work. So I just want to know, how big is your team? Why are you putting so much updates and things into your new products?
It's just me. On Windward, it's just me. I do have another guy helping me out right now, but he's working on an entirely different project, and it's not Windward.
That's great. It's really good to hear that we actually don't need investments. We don't need a regular schedule, and we don't even need a humongous team to have a fairly successful game companies. Let's think about how can we give to other people from this conversation. What did you wish you knew when you were just finishing university?
I wish I wouldn't have waited so long, to be honest with you. And I also wish if I was to go back to school, I wish I would have paid more attention to math, because that is one thing that keeps coming back to me. And trigonometry, algebra, all that stuff, I really should have paid a lot more attention to school, because it comes very important in game development.
That's very interesting. At first, I thought it's not important at all. Actually, I'm taking math right now. I'm just taking it for other purposes. Maybe I should pay more attention to my math class. Now I'm just like, whatever, just get over with it. So I should pay more attention. That's good to hear.
Certain things, they don't make a whole lot of sense in game development, like probabilities, for example.
Right.
And it's not something that's really relevant, but trigonometry, algebra, that's definitely something that's highly used in game development.
Right. So as you mentioned, you have your next game coming. What's next game? Can you share something?
Not really, not at this point. It's something that I keep coming back to and working on every once in a while. I know what I want it to be, but at the same time, when I actually implement it and I look at what's there, it doesn't seem to be that fun.
That's interesting.
It's going to be one of those things that it develops as it develops, you know? It'll grow naturally, and then I'll talk about it.
So that's your process of your game design. You have an idea, you make it, and you play, and then decide if it's good or not.
If it's fun, I keep going with it. If it's not, I try something else until it's fun. Basically, that's it.
That's awesome. So I invite you here because I think you inspired me. I want to have this interview so you could inspire other people. So is there any person in your life really inspire you?
I'm inspired by a lot of game developers. Like the Windward game that I created, for example, was inspired by Sid Meier's Pirates, by his game. Not in the sense that it was a fantastic game. I mean, it was a pretty good game. But in the sense that I could see where I could improve. And that's the thing about games. If you just play games that are completely perfect, then you're not going to be able to improve on that. You know, but if you play games that are actually imperfect, something that's maybe some critics didn't like, some critics liked, you know, something where there's some negativity there, you will have a much better understanding of what works, what doesn't, and how you can improve it. So in order to make games, you got to play games. That's all there is to it.
It really inspires me how you're thinking of the potential of any kind of product. So you see a flaw and you try to fix it and make it better. Is that
not necessarily fix it, but more of
polishing it up?
Polish it, yeah. Just think of ways to improve it.
Yes, that's awesome. Well, thanks for your time, and well, we'll see you guys in next episode. Bye for now. Is connected as well. Just click play. You can see me from the connect view. It has a little bit depth. You can see this as well. Hope your example works as well.